Al Green, a Democrat and member of the House of Representatives, has been censured. Sounds bad, right? Now what? Well, nothing really. When a U.S. lawmaker is censured, it is a formal public reprimand for misconduct, but does not remove them from office or impact their participation in the lawmaking process. Essentially, you have to stand in front of the chamber and get publicly shamed, but this ultimately has no impact on a lawmaker getting reelected or serving on committees. As an added bonus, you can use this time at the front of the chamber with all eyes on you to do what you please. Make a joke, give a speech, or sing a song, which is exactly what Al Green did after receiving his punishment.
Representative Al Green be censured with public reading of this resolution by the Speaker.
This has led many Americans to ask, how does Congress punish their own? And is this the only way in which members of Congress are punished? And where in the Constitution can this all be found? The short answer, Congress has 6 options to punish members, 1 even more trivial than a censure, and 4 options which are significantly worse. While these aren't explicitly stated in the Constitution, there is a section that will shed more light on this. Article 1, Section 5, Clause 2. Each House may determine the rules of its proceedings, punish its members for disorderly behavior, and, with the concurrence of 2/3, expel a member. The Constitution does not specify the actual procedures for carrying out these punishments. It also does not define what constitutes disorderly behavior. These things are left to each chamber's rules. So, what did Al Green do? If you're not aware, he disrupted Trump's joint address to Congress multiple times. After being told twice by Speaker Mike Johnson to sit down or be ejected, he then stood and shouted that the president has no mandate to cut Medicaid. He was escorted from the chamber by the sergeant-at-arms. But Green wasn't the only one to protest during the speech. Other Democratic elected officials expressed their dissatisfaction in other ways. Representatives Maxwell Frost of Florida, Jasmine Crockett of Texas, Maxine Dexter, and Andrea Salinas of Oregon all walked out of Trump's address. The same thing happens when we have Democrat presidents. Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert repeatedly interrupted Biden's speeches, with Greene going so far as to do it again during Biden's 2024 State of the Union address. While childish, these actions didn't warrant any punishments from Congress. If they did, they would probably get the lowest form of punishment, which is called a reprimand. It's less severe than a censure, but still a formal statement of disapproval. The lawmaker is not required to stand before the full chamber for public condemnation, which may actually be worse for the offender as they won't get the floor to sing everyone a song. These are used for less serious ethics violations, like minor rule breaking or conflict of interest stuff. And by that, I can use the Democratic representative for Massachusetts, Barney Frank, in 1990 as an example. He was reprimanded over a conflict of interest regarding a personal relationship. This is such a weird one. Frank had a relationship with a male prostitute, Stephen Goby, whom he later hired as a personal assistant. Goby ran an escort service out of Barney Frank's home, allegedly without Frank's knowledge. Barney Frank admitted to fixing 33 parking tickets for Goby, but denied any involvement in illegal activities. There's a lot of weird stuff happening, but this may be the single weirdest part of the story. How do you amass that many parking tickets? I live in Florida, parking lots for miles, briefly interrupted by golf courses, alligator lakes, and then more parking lots. I have yet to receive one, and if I do get one, I might just frame it. Where were we? The House Ethics Committee investigated and found that while Frank did not break any laws, he showed bad judgment in assisting Goby. And that's where the reprimand happened, which had no bearing on his career as he continued to win elections for 23 years after his punishment. The next punishment is censorship. Basically, a reprimand with the addition of having to stand before your peers while they look down on you. The most recent example, other than Al Green, was in December 2023. Representative Jamal Bowman, a Democrat from New York, was censured after pulling a fire alarm in a Capitol office building under non-emergency circumstances. The incident occurred ahead of a critical vote, and Bowman pleaded guilty to a misdemeanor, resulting in a $1,000 fine. And this actually brings up the next level in punishments, which are fines. So Bowman was fined by an actual court of law for $1,000, not by Congress itself. When Congress fines one of its members, it's actually quite rare. In 2021, Representative John Rutherford, a Republican from Florida, was found to have violated the Stock Act, which requires members of Congress to publicly disclose their stock transactions within 45 days. Rutherford failed to report 157 trades worth between $652,000 and $3.5 million. The Office of Congressional Ethics noted that the fine for 157 violations would typically amount to $31,400 in fines. He ended up being fined $800. Now, when Congress decides to fine its members, the fine money is typically deposited into one of two places, depending on the nature of the fine. The first is the U.S. Treasury General Fund. This is the same fund where federal tax revenue goes, meaning the money essentially becomes part of the government's general operating fund. This is outlined in various congressional rules and under the Miscellaneous Receipts Act, which is Title 31 of the U.S. Code. Now, the only other place the fine can end up in is the Office of Finance. This is less common. In certain unique situations, such as an internal administrative fine or a penalty for violating chamber rules, the House of Representatives or Senate may deposit the money into a fund that supports operating expenses for that particular chamber. These could be for simple things like dress code violations. All right, let's get into the bigger punishments. Loss of committee assignments is the first significant disciplinary action in Congress, impacting a member's influence and ability to shape legislation. Committee roles are vital as they allow members to draft, debate, and amend proposed laws within specific policy areas. Removal from these positions can diminish a legislator's effectiveness and standing among colleagues. It works a little different in each chamber. In the House, the majority party's steering committee typically determines committee assignments. A member can be removed from their committee roles through a vote by this committee or by a resolution passed on the House floor. In the Senate, committee assignments are managed by party leaders. A senator may lose their committee positions through decisions made by their party's leadership or through a Senate resolution. One of the most recent examples of this was in 2021 with Marjorie Taylor Greene, a Republican from Georgia. She had made statements endorsing conspiracy theories and violence against political opponents. I don't even know if reading them in this video would violate any YouTube policies, so if you're curious as to the exact words, just run a Google search. Anyways, the House voted to remove her from the Education, Labor Committee, and the Budget Committee. But the loss of committee assignments punishment isn't always permanent. She has since regained committee positions after the Republican Party regained control of the House in 2023, being assigned to the House Homeland Security Committee and the House Oversight and Accountability Committee in the 118th Congress. Now, before a lawmaker finds themselves being kicked out completely through expulsion, the biggest punishment that can be issued is called contempt of Congress. This punishment is a means to enforce Congress's power to investigate matters and hold individuals or entities accountable. Here's the breakdown. Contempt of Congress occurs when someone refuses to testify or produce documents after being subpoenaed by Congress, refuses to comply with subpoenas issued by congressional committees, or obstructs or impedes the work of a congressional committee, investigation, or hearing. And this is for all those who are watching that don't know exactly what a subpoena is but are nodding along anyways. A subpoena is a legal document that requires someone to appear in court or produce documents. You can use a subpoena to get information from people who aren't directly involved in your case. Now, there are two types of contempt. The first is criminal contempt, in which individuals can be held criminally accountable for contempt of Congress. The other is civil contempt, where Congress may seek a civil remedy where courts are asked to enforce compliance with the subpoena order. The potential punishments for contempt of Congress are twofold. In a criminal contempt case, Congress can refer a case to the Department of Justice for prosecution. Those convicted of contempt can face fines, imprisonment, or both. In a civil contempt case, Congress may ask a federal court to compel testimony or document production, which could result in civil sanctions. This can involve contempt fines and other civil remedies, including imprisonment. The most recent case comes from 2022, in which the House Select Committee on the January 6 attack subpoenaed Steve Bannon, a former advisor to President Trump and frequent visitor of these videos, to testify about his involvement in the events leading up to the Capitol riot. He refused to comply, citing executive privilege. The House voted to hold Steve Bannon in contempt for not complying with the subpoena. The Department of Justice charged Bannon with contempt of Congress. He was convicted of 2 counts of contempt. He was sentenced to 4 months in prison and fined $6,500. All right, we made it. Finally, we have the end punishment, the last one that can be given, which is called expulsion. Expulsion is the removal of a sitting member from either the House of Representatives or the Senate due to misconduct that is deemed severe enough to undermine the integrity of Congress or the individual's role as a representative or senator. Expulsion is different from censure or reprimand in that it involves the complete removal of the individual from Congress, thus ending their term in office. Now, this is the only punishment directly from the Constitution itself. Each House may determine the rules of its proceedings, punish its members for disorderly behavior, and with a concurrence of 2/3, expel a member. There's a whole process for this punishment as well. Step number 1 would involve an investigation, which can be initiated by a member of Congress, a whole committee, or the chamber itself. The investigation examines whether the member's behavior meets the threshold for expulsion. Step 2 is resolution. If the investigation reveals sufficient evidence of serious misconduct, a resolution calling for expulsion may be introduced. The resolution must be debated and voted on by the full chamber. Step 3 is the vote itself. For expulsion to occur, the chamber in question, whether that's the House or the Senate, must approve the resolution with a 2/3 majority vote. This high threshold ensures that expulsion is reserved for only the most serious offenses. And step 4 is expulsion itself. So if the resolution passes, the member is expelled from Congress and their position is effectively vacated. What might constitute an expulsion? Well, there's a few things. Criminal convictions, especially ones that involve corruption, bribery, or other forms of dishonesty. Simply engaging in corruption or bribery without the criminal conviction can also do the trick. Acts of violence or involvement in insurrection against the U.S. government, and serious misconduct or behavior that undermines the dignity of the institution, such as engaging in sexual misconduct or fraud. Finally, if you're convicted of a felony crime, then the House or the Senate could choose to expel you. Now, the most recent example was in 2002. James Traficant was found guilty of accepting bribes, committing racketeering, and evading taxes. He was accused of using his position to accept bribes from businesses and engaging in other criminal activities. After his conviction, the House of Representatives voted overwhelmingly in favor of his expulsion. Traficant became the first member of Congress to be expelled in nearly 100 years, with the previous expulsion happening during the Civil War. Now, despite being expelled, he served his prison sentence and later tried to run for office again, but was unsuccessful. Now, you may be asking, what happens when the seat is vacated? Well, a special election is held in the affected district to fill the vacancy. The timing and procedures for the special election are determined by state law. In most cases, the governor of the state has the authority to call for a special election. The governor may also set the date for the election. In other states, the state legislature may have laws that specify the process and timing of a special election. The process is generally similar to a regular election, but it is held sooner to fill the vacant seat as quickly as possible. Well, there you have it. These are the 6 punishments that Congress can issue to its own members. What do you think? Too much or not enough? Me personally, I feel like these punishments are kinda not enough, especially for the things that they get away with. But that's just me. Okay, that's it for now. Thanks so much for sticking to the end of my video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. We'll make more videos soon.